I have to be honest with you. When I first saw the packet for today's deep dive,
Yeah.
my brain went straight to a very specific
Oh,
image.
yeah?
I'm thinking Paddington Bear. I'm thinking a sticky jar in the back of a cupboard that's been there since, what, 1998?
Right, the emergency toast topping?
Exactly. I was thinking, okay, we're doing a cute, nostalgic little segment. But then I started reading the source material.
Mm-hmm.
This breakdown of Portugal Risili, or Turkish orange marmalade. And I realized I was completely 100% wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't really about breakfast at all, is it?
Not even close. I mean, sure, it ends up on toast,
Yeah.
eventually. But the journey to get there, that is a survival story. It's a chemistry lesson. It's actually a pretty intense study on how humans learn to manipulate nature to, well, to defy time.
That's the exact vibe I got.
Well,
The sources frame this humble jar not as a condiment, but as a convergence of history, molecular gastronomy, and what they poetically call sweetening time.
sweetening time.
Yeah.
That is the key phrase for this whole discussion.
It's a beautiful line. So here's our mission for this deep dive. We are going to look past the label on the jar. We're going to decode the universal language of marmalade, from the biochemistry of pectin to the maritime history that actually kept sailors alive.
And maybe most importantly, we're going to figure out why we, as a species, are so obsessed with eating bitter fruit peels.
Hmm.
Because if you think about it biologically, that it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. Usually in nature, bitter is a big flashing red light that means poison, don't eat this.
Exactly.
But here, we're taking the most bitter part of the fruit, boiling it in sugar and calling it sophisticated. So let's get into it. The sources start with the history, but they make a distinction that I think is crucial. Marmalade didn't start as a treat.
No. It started as a desperate attempt to stop the clock. You have to put yourself in the mindset of a pre-industrial human. It's November. You have a tree full of fruit. But you know that in 2 weeks, that fruit is going to be a rotting mush on the ground.
And in 2 months, you might be starving.
Right. So the enemy isn't just a lack of flavor. The enemy is decay.
The enemy is entropy.
Decomposition, exactly.
Yeah.
So the earliest forms of this weren't the spreadable jelly we know. The Greeks and Romans were boiling quinces in honey. They were creating these incredibly dense, thick pastes.
So they weren't trying to make a glaze. They were building a calorie reserve.
That's it. And this leads us to the etymology, which I found fascinating because it totally upended what I thought I knew.
Me too. I always assumed marmalade was just a generic word for citrus jam.
That's a really common misconception. The word actually comes from the Portuguese marmalada, and marmelo is the Portuguese word for quince.
The quince, that hard, lumpy fruit that nobody really eats raw anymore.
Exactly. Quince is basically a rock until you cook it.
Yeah.
But it has massive, massive amounts of pectin. So the original marmalada was a solid block. You didn't spread it with a knife. You sliced it like cheese.
A solid preservation of energy. So how did we make the jump from a sliceable quince block to the spreadable orange suspension we have today?
It just tracks with the trade routes. As citrus fruits, specifically bitter oranges like the Seville orange moved west into Europe, people started applying those same quince techniques to them.
But oranges have a different structure, a different water content.
Totally different.
Yeah.
So when you apply that same process, it eventually evolved into this suspension of peel and jelly that we recognize.
The sources mention a maritime connection here that feels like a huge pivot in the story.
This is where marmalade stops being just food and becomes a strategic military asset.
Really?
Think about the age of exploration. You're launching these wooden ships across the Atlantic. What's the biggest threat to your crew? It's not pirates, it's not storms.
It's scurvy.
Scurvy, vitamin C deficiency. It killed more sailors than all the battles and shipwrecks combined.
Horrific.
It is. The problem is vitamin C is unstable. Fresh fruit rots in days. You can't carry enough lemons to last a 6-month voyage.
But marmalade.
Marmalade is shelf stable. Now, we have to be accurate here. The long cooking process does destroy some vitamin C, but not all of it. It became a way to transport the essence of the fruit and the vital nutrients across the ocean.
High-density energy and nutrients that didn't spoil. It's almost like the primitive version of an astronaut's food packet.
That's a perfect analogy. It fueled the mapping of the world.
Wow. Okay, let's move from the ocean to the laboratory, because the source material emphasizes that making this stuff correctly is a science experiment.
It is pure organic chemistry. If you just throw oranges and sugar in a pot, you're probably going to get syrup or rock candy, but you won't get marmalade.
The ingredient list seems so simple, though. Thick-skinned oranges, sugar, orange juice, lemon juice. That's it.
Simple ingredients, incredibly complex molecular interactions.
right?
Let's break down the thick skin requirement first. The recipe is very specific about this. Why do you think that is?
My first thought was just texture. You want those nice, chewy chunks of rind.
Hmm.
But based on the chemistry notes, it's about the pectin.
It's all about the pectin. Pectin is a polysaccharide, a long chain of carbohydrate molecules found in plant cell walls. It's the structural glue holding the plant cells together.
Okay.
In citrus, the mother lode of pectin isn't in the juice, it's in the albedo.
The albedo. That's that white, spongy stuff under the zest, the pith.
Correct. If you kill an orange, it's the white stuff. If you use a thin-skinned orange, you simply don't have enough natural gelling agent.
So industrial producers must cheat.
They do. They add powered commercial pectin so they can use whatever cheap fruit they want. But for traditional Portugal Risselli, you are relying entirely on the biology of the fruit itself.
So you're extracting the glue from the skin to set the liquid.
Precisely. But here's the catch. Pectin is picky. It doesn't just work on its own. It needs very specific chemical conditions to form a gel.
And that's where the lemon juice comes in. I always thought that was just for flavor, to balance the sweetness.
That's the culinary result. But the chemical function is totally different. Imagine pectin molecules as long strings floating in water. Naturally, they have a negative electrical charge.
Like magnets repelling each other.
Exactly like that. They push each other away. They refuse to tangle up. If you just boil oranges in sugar without enough acid, the pectin strands stay separate and you get syrup. It never sets.
So the lemon juice, it turns off the magnets.
It neutralizes the charge. The acid from the lemon juice neutralizes those negative charges on the pectin strands. Suddenly, they stop repelling each other.
And they can bond.
They can get close enough to tangle up and form a 3D network that traps the liquid. The lemon is the matchmaker.
Okay, that makes sense. But then we have the third player, and it's the big one, sugar. The ratio in the guide is 1.1, 1 kilogram of fruit to 1 kilogram of sugar.
It sounds aggressive.
It sounds like a dentist's nightmare.
I get it. We are conditioned to reduce sugar, but in preservation chemistry, sugar isn't just a sweetener, it's a functional ingredient. You can't just cut it in half.
Because of the preservation aspect.
2 reasons. First, yes, preservation. We talk about something called water activity. Bacteria and mold need available water to grow. Sugar's hygroscopic. It binds to water molecules. It locks them up so the bacteria can't use them.
So it creates a desert for bacteria even though the jam looks wet?
Exactly. It makes the water chemically unavailable. But the second reason ties back to pectin. The sugar actually pulls water away from the pectin molecules. So it sort of bullies the pectin strands into bonding with each other instead of the water.
So the acid stops them from repelling and the sugar forces them together.
That's the triad. If you lower the sugar ratio too much, the gel will be weak and it'll mold in the fridge in 2 weeks. That 1.1 ratio ensures texture and safety.
It's a structural component. Well, okay, we've got the ingredients. We understand the molecular dance. Now, the technique, because the guide says you can still mess this up easily, it talks about mastering the bitterness.
This is the art form. This is where a cook becomes a chef. We mentioned the albedo has the pectin, but the zest, the orange part, has the flavonoids.
And flavonoids are what give it that sharp, bitter bite.
Yes. Naringin is a big one. It's incredibly bitter. So the source material outlines a very specific chef trick. You don't just throw the peels in the pot. You have to blanch them.
The recipe says boil the peels in plenty of water, drain them, and then repeat 2 or 3 times.
This relies on diffusion. You're using the hot water to leach out the flavonoids. But notice it says repeat. Why not just boil it once for 20 minutes?
I assumed it was to stop the peels from getting too mushy.
It's actually about concentration gradients. If you boil it once, the water eventually gets saturated with bitterness. It becomes as bitter as the peel, so the extraction just stops. By draining that water and adding fresh water, you reset the gradient. You pull out a layer of bitterness, dump it, pull out another layer.
It's like rinsing a dirty sponge. You need clean water to get more dirt out.
Exactly. And the goal, the source is very emphatic about this, is not to remove all the bitterness.
Right. It says a slight bitterness is a sign of sophistication.
Think about it. A child's lollipop versus expensive dark chocolate, or a craft beer, or espresso. Adult palates appreciate bitterness because it adds dimension.
It provides the base notes to the treble of the sugar.
Beautifully put. You need that tension.
After the blanching, there's another step that requires patience, the resting phase. You mix the sugar and the fruit, and then you just walk away.
This is the step most home cooks skip because they're impatient. and it ruins the texture.
What's happening while it sits there overnight?
Osmosis. If you throw a piece of fruit into boiling syrup, the water inside rushes out too fast. The fruit shrivels and becomes tough and leathery.
Nobody wants leathery fruit in their jam.
No. By letting it sit in sugar first, you allow a slow exchange. The sugar slowly penetrates the fruit and the water slowly comes out. The fruit essentially candies itself before you even turn on the stove.
So you can't rush the chemistry. There was one little tip in the notes that made me laugh. Adding a tiny bit of butter or oil.
No, that's not an old wives' tale. That's fluid dynamics. When you boil jam, it foams like crazy. That foam is just trapped air bubbles.
But it's annoying to skim off.
Right. Fat breaks surface tension. A tiny amount, half a teaspoon, disrupts the film, holding those bubbles together. The foam just collapses.
That is a pro tip. Okay, we're at the finish line. The pot is bubbling. How do we know it's done? The guy has a very stern warning. Judging by eye while it's boiling is misleading.
This is the heartbreak moment for so many people. Hot sugar syrup looks like water. If you keep boiling it until it looks thick in the pot, you have massively overcooked it.
You've made orange cement.
You'll need a chisel to get it out of the jar.
So we use the cold plate test.
The analog solution to a physics problem.
Okay.
You keep a saucer in the freezer. You drop a teaspoon of hot jam onto it. It cools instantly. You push it with your finger. If it wrinkles,
It's done.
the gel structure has formed. Turn off the heat immediately.
I love that. Such a tactile test for such a complex process. So let's say we've done it. We have a perfect jar of portocalo Rosselli. The source challenges us to go beyond the toast.
Please, it deserves better.
The guide mentions cheese, which I hadn't really thought of.
Oh, cheese is the big one. Specifically aged salty cheeses. A sharp cheddar, an aged manchego.
That savory sweet contrast again.
It just cuts through the fat. Think about it. Cheese is fatty, creamy, and salty. Marmalade is acidic, sweet, and bitter. It hits every single receptor on your tongue.
And cooking with it, glazes for poultry.
Duck à l'orange is the classic, of course, but use it as a glaze for roast chicken or even mix it into a barbecue sauce base. The citrus oils in the peel become so aromatic when they're heated, it really lifts the whole dish.
Before we wrap up, we need to do a reality check on the nutrition. We talked about sailors and vitamin C, but should we be treating this as a health food?
Let's be realistic, it's not a kale smoothie.
Chuckles.
Right. The source is clear on this. Yes, there are antioxidants. The flavonoids, the bitter stuff, are actually great for reducing oxidative stress, and there is some residual vitamin C, but you are also eating 50% sugar.
So don't eat the whole jar with a spoon.
Exactly. The takeaway is to view it as a support food. It's not the fuel, it's the spark. It brings joy, it adds flavor, but it is energy dense. Moderation is key.
It's quality over quantity, which I think brings us back to the core philosophy of this whole thing.
It really does.
We started with the idea of preservation, saving the season, but as we dug into the details, the blanching, the resting, the balance, it feels like there's a bigger lesson here.
I keep going back to that line, marmalade is time sweetened. When you open a jar of this in July, you are literally tasting January. You're tasting sunlight from 6 months ago. It's a time capsule.
And it's not just preserved, it's transformed, it's alchemy.
That's the important part. It's not just an orange anymore. It's something new. And it's the bitterness that makes it work.
That was the most surprising takeaway for me. The idea that we shouldn't try to scrub away all the difficult parts.
We live in a world that tries to sanitize food. We breed vegetables to be sweeter. We add corn syrup to everything. We want things to be easy. But marmalade insists on being difficult. It insists on that bitter edge.
And without that edge, the sweetness would just be cloying. It would be boring.
Exactly. The struggle, the resistance of the bitterness is what gives it character.
That is a powerful thought to leave on. Maybe we need to start running from bitterness, whether it's in our food or, well, anywhere else.
Perfect balance.
A little bit of bite makes the sweet parts worth it. Thanks for diving in with us. Now go check your pantry. You might have a masterpiece hiding behind the cereal boxes.
See you next time.